Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin Powers. I am also the festival director and program director for Something Wicked Film Festival and Events. And welcome to this amazing podcast in which we delve into the deep and dark recesses of the horror genre, no matter what decade they're from and no matter what genre or subgenre of the horror genre they come from. Now, as a mandate of some of the things that we're trying to get through in this new year, 2025, we're trying to touch base on a lot of different films from a lot of different eras. And so tonight's film is one of those rare films from a rare decade that we don't talk a whole lot about. But the filmmakers, the director's name will be very familiar to a lot of horror enthusiasts out there because his name is the immortal Mario Bava, and this is 1963's Black Sabbath. Now, if you know or are familiar with this film, you know that there are two different versions of this film. There is one, the American version, and then there's the original Italian version. And essentially what happens is they flip-flop some of the stories. But we're going to take a deep dive into each one of the segments of this anthology film. And to help me out on this episode is the amazingly creative and Thomas Tenerello. I had to leave a little break there just to let people think about what I was going to say. So, Thomas, thank you for joining us today on the show.
Ramizio, thank you very much. For a second there, I thought you were going to say the amazingly Italian Thomas Tenerello. And I feel like with this movie, I must represent my people. So I will do my absolute worst to do that because I suck at that.
Well, everyone out there who knows me. I'm a huge Mario Bava fan, so it's actually surprising that we're going to be doing this as one of our first shows on the program as an anthology film. But I absolutely love this film, and we have done very few anthology films on the show so far, and we hope to.
We need to do a whole lot more because, like, we used to have an idea where we were going to take out a whole block of the month of August. It was going to be Anthology August. I think we thought a very awkward title, but there's not enough anthology movies, and probably in the horror genre, and probably it's because I was at some film festival some years ago, and someone was talking about why is it so hard to make an anthology? Because the studios or the distribution companies the conventional wisdom is that they don't sell. And yet people keep making them. I don't know what, you flip on Tubi or you flip on YouTube or you go to your dollar store and the DVD section there's always at least 3 or 4 horror anthologies. And yet, so somebody's making these freaking movies.
From my understanding, in this day and age, anthology movies do not sell very well, mostly because the consensus is that each segment is not always equally as good as one. There might be one standout one. Yeah, I know that's a weird thing to say, but the longest running franchise right now for anthology is obviously the VHS franchise, which is still going strong on Shudder. But it did have a couple of entries there that were kind of, they probably should have ended.
I mean, honestly, folks, does anybody remember any other segment from VHS 1 except for the amateur night one with the siren? I mean, that one, again, had the standout one that everyone remembers. Nobody remembers any of the other ones. So that whole thought process you mentioned makes no sense to me.
Yeah, well, in the second one, I actually enjoyed VHS 2 more than the first one because I liked more of the stories in the second one, and I thought the third one was god-awful. But they came back with the fourth and fifth one, now that they're doing them based on different years and decades. I actually really like what Shudder's doing with the series now. So, and they're not all equally as good either. There are some segments that are pretty good.
There's always, and actually, there's always varying quality in the stories of any anthology. But that's kind of part of the appeal of it. Is if you want variety, and also the short horror story has always been part of the building blocks of the genre. You know, especially when you go back to Edgar Allan Poe, he never wrote he wrote one novel, and it's not his best work either. It's all the short stories that everyone remembers. H.P. Lovecraft, I don't think that man ever wrote a long form thing. Even though I'm I'm not a huge fan of Lovecraft myself, but I know lots of people are. But yeah, so and I know now that I think about it, I think maybe the part of the reason why maybe these low budget anthologies just keep getting cranked out is I think some of them cheat by acquiring shorts that have already been existing out on the interwebs. Like, for instance, I saw not too long ago, I sat down on Tubi and watched a anthology called Hilarious. And it's and it's literally, not to get too far on a tangent, but it's literally just horror comedy shorts. And that's all they had in common, is that they're all horror shorts that are funny. And I thought, oh, that's a neat idea. But it has no wraparound or anything putting them together except for that genre. And there was at least one short on there that I had seen on this other shorts collection series called Etheria, which is supposed to collect all the great noteworthy shorts in horror and science fiction and fantasy from prominent up-and-coming women directors. So, and there's another anthology I can think of where it's like that too, where there's a guy who's like a radio DJ or something, and most of those shorts were stuff that were already available on YouTube or something. So, for whatever reason, I guess the director knew them, and he just like cobbled it together. So, that's a great way of like not spending any money.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't think a lot of these anthology movies, especially even the VHS ones, are given a whole lot of money to play with. I think the anthology movie that probably had a lot of money to play with was I Love You, Paris.
Oh, Paris Je t'aime.
Yeah.
I love Paris Je t'aime.
Yeah, but I guarantee you they had some money to put behind that one.
oh yeah. But then again, that's another thing we may talk about too, is like Europe, especially like in Italy and France. Well, in Italy not so much anymore, but like Europe and Britain too, I think, have government funded programs for the arts that help fund movies and TV shows sometimes. So yeah, they have those things. We're probably one of the only countries in the world that does not have that.
And we've diverged off our topic today, which is supposed to be Mario Bava's Black Sabbath.
So now you said that you're a huge fan of Bava. I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum, and I have only seen 3 Bava movies, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm not as well versed in him, but I am well versed in like all the guys who Bava influenced. I feel like Brava's place in horror film history is really more or less of he was the maestro who inspired more well-known guys after him. Correct. Like you could see Dario Argento all over Mario Bava. You can see him. You can see his influence in Quentin Tarantino stuff. You can see his influence in so many other young filmmakers who keep go back to his style of filmmaking, which we'll talk about what makes Brava in a few minutes. And also, I think his son is probably more famous. Lamberto, because he's the director of Demons or Demoni. Demone, as it was in Italian. The what?
We haven't gotten to on the show, but we will eventually get there because I'm a huge fan of both of them.
Oh, see, there you go. Yeah. So as a result, the Brava name is a brand, I think, because of that. So like what I've seen, I saw obviously this movie, both versions. What's the other Brava movie I saw? Oh, I saw Planet of the Vampires.
Vampires.
Yeah, which is I think it's probably one of the only times he did science fiction. And then I saw Danger Diabolique.
Yep.
Which was famously the last movie reviewed by Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Oh, really? Didn't know that. But the good thing
it was the last movie of the original series before they had the reboot series. But yes, it was the last one.
Well, thankfully.
So.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, you were. I'm sorry. I was pretty much done with my train of thought. You go ahead.
Well, thankfully, most of his films have now become readily available. For a long time, I wasn't able to see a lot of his films because they just had not been translated over here, or I couldn't find a version that had subtitles. But a lot of them have now been made available here through some of the box sets, which I happen to pick up the box sets, Mario Bava box sets 1 and 2, which now I can watch most of his films there, but I've kind of collected a lot of his other films. Blood and Black Lace is another favorite one that we need to get around to say.
Oh yes, that is on my queue. Yes, absolutely. Because I'm not a huge I'm not a huge fan of the slasher genre, but I do have a couple of script ideas in that genre that I'm wanting to develop.
Mhm.
And before I do that, I gotta see some more of that genre. But like from what I've seen already, I seem like I like the proto slashers,
Mm.
and I think Brava was like he kind of broke that foundation and pretty much created the proto slasher. I think
Yeah.
with Blood and Black Lace, and more famously Bay of Blood,
Mm-hmm.
and
Bad Blood.
otherwise known as Twitch of the Death Nerve.
Yeah.
Um, if you're
Unfortunately for us, his films have multiple titles or multiple cuts. Like Lisa and the Devil, there are multiple cuts of that and multiple titles for it. Because the Italians would have one version and the American audience would have another version. So.
Yeah, it just makes life more interesting for horror collectors. But yeah, so I first saw this movie. It may have been my first Brava exposure, although I might have seen Planet of the Vampires first, probably because I'd heard that it was an inspiration for Life Force, and I loved Life Force. So, um, but once upon a time when I was in college in the early 2000s, they still had this thing called cable television, and there was this obscure channel. And I'm not being facetious; it really was obscure. It's called Flicks, and it had like a random kind of grab bag of old stuff, and that's where I first saw Black Sabbath late at night one night, and at least one of these stories in this anthology freaked the crap out of me. I'll tell you which one it is later. Um, so yeah, that was my first exposure to it, and it was the American version,
Mm.
and I know because well we'll talk about that because like you said they're not they was re-edited, but also so the stories have a different order, but the host segments are also totally different. And like there's more host segments in the American version. Like for the American version, you get more Karloff for your buck. But in the
Yes.
Italian version, you only have Karloff at the beginning and Karloff at the end. There's no Karloff in the middle, except for, his performance as
Story.
the Verdelak in the Verdelak. That's about it, though.
Well,
So that's one of the many reasons why it's different.
what the American version was the first version of this film I ever saw because I became a huge fan of Boris Karloff in college. So that was my first experience with watching this film and being exposed to Mario Bava. Now, I had seen Planet of the Vampires before knowing who Mario Bava was. Like I'd seen it, but I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his style. I didn't know anything about him before I had seen it. It wasn't until after I started watching a lot of his other films that I finally got around to saying, "Oh shit, I've seen Planet of the Vampires. Let me go back and rewatch it with a more critical eye." But Boris Karloff is the reason why I saw this movie when I was in college. I became a huge Boris Karloff fan at that time.
Now, for those out there who are extremely ignorant and maybe have hatched out of an egg yesterday, we all know Mr. Boris Karloff is the Frankenstein monster in the original Universal horror cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, he went on to do many other fantastic, usually villainous parts in other things. But this is not the first time that he was basically a horror host, because he had, I think, he had already been on as the host of a show called Thriller,
Yeah.
which was also an anthology series, and it was basically an Alfred Hitchcock Presents ripoff in the first season. And then after a while, it took a turn, and they changed and basically became just gothic horror and weird kind of adaptations of stuff. They even did an adaptation of like The Telltale Heart and like a couple of Poe stories, which is pretty incredible. But Karloff, I don't think he ever acted in any of those. But he
I've
was.
never seen the whole series. I've seen random episodes, and the ones I've seen, he wasn't in any of those. He just hosted it.
So the Roku channel is how I found the show. So if any of y'all have a Roku out there, you can watch the first 3, or I think it's like 2.5 seasons of Thriller on there, uncut and commercial free. The first episode's kind of fun because you see a young Leslie Nielsen fighting off a stalker, which is fun. Always fun to see a young Leslie Nielsen before Forbidden Planet, and of course Naked Gun and Creepshow. So rest in peace, Leslie. So he'd already established himself as that, and then and he gets this gig, which I read somewhere that, according to like a Karloff himself, he said that this movie he had the most fun on of anything he's ever been in, which is saying something. And the American version, I think, of the host segments, you can tell he's having a lot of fun. He does seem very gleeful in his in the way that he's delivering his dialogue to the camera and treating us like co-conspirators in this experience we're about to have. But I will say, like, he still got that energy in the Italian version, but the staging is very different. It's the Italian version staging is to give all context, the American version, it starts off with just he's like a floating head in the darkness. And then the next segment is a white background with a huge telephone.
Yep.
That they use forced perspective on. And the third segment, I think he's in the forest, Brava's fake forest, for the Vertilac segment, and that one starts with a word on vampires, and he'll start and he does a spiel for that. The Italian version, there's no floating head thing. It just starts off with a big wide like stage with whirling kind of colors behind him, like it's smoke or some kind of subconscious wave of shadows coming from behind him, and then the camera slowly zooms in on him. The dialogue's a little different then too. I tried to make a note of that, but I feel like the question then that you guys out there might not, who haven't seen this movie yet, might ask, well, which version should I see if I just had to pick one? And honestly, I feel like you should see both because they have their strengths and weaknesses. I'm not sure I prefer either. I think because I think the American version is overall a little better, but I think the staging is better in the Italian version, and I think that the Italian version of the telephone is the superior version.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people have seen the American version or prefer that because obviously it ends with Boris Karloff's story, the Verdelak. And so then after that, it goes straight to the fake scene, the fake movie making scene, and then it leaves audiences a bit more satisfied than to have the Verdelak, the second story in the anthology. So.
Yeah, in the Italian version, it's like a big Karloff sandwich where you have the Verdelak and then you have telephone is the beginning, is the first story in the Italian version, or Il Telefono as they would call it in Italy. Then I Verdelak in the second one, and then it ends with, in my opinion, the best of the three is Drop of Water. So at least the Italian version, you have a kind of progression of quality. The stories get scarier and scarier. But in the American version, I could see why they shifted it there, because they wanted to bury the lead. They wanted to put their star as like deep in, they didn't want people leaving without seeing a drop of water, because that would be a crime. Because like I said, I think it's the scariest of the three stories. And yeah, I mean, I know what they did, but like I said, I think it behooves y'all out there to see both versions.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about each of the segments. Let's start with the telephone. What do you think about the telephone?
Telephone. So, the thing about this story, first of all, like, we should probably say, like, where these stories come from. So, like, Mario Brava is considered one of the people who also, like, not only invented the modern slasher, with Bay of Blood, but he's also credited as being the person who pretty much invented the genre of giallo in film.
Mm-hmm.
And this story is a classic giallo in every sense of the word. Although later on he would do The Girl Who Knew Too Much, and that is considered in fact, I think it was released the same year. And that movie is considered the first giallo feature film. This would be the first giallo thing, period. And for those of you out there who don't know what that is, I will try and represent it for my people. So a gialli here is basically stories of crime and murder and salacious stuff, and sometimes with horror elements in it that were usually Italian translations of hard-boiled crime novels and also like mysteries like Agatha Christie and stuff like that. And just because censorship laws were so big in bookstores in Italy at the time, they were not allowed to have salacious covers. So they just put yellow covers with the title on it. And that is what the word gialli means, which means yellow. So these were like yellow stories, yellow films, and that's what this is. So in this case with the telephone, it's basically a crime story. You could easily see like a toned down version of this, especially the American version, which cuts out the lesbian subplot, which is not really a subplot. It's a layer of her character that makes things make more sense, in my opinion. It makes all her motivations make more sense. But you could easily see a version of this play on Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and it's all in one room, one apartment. Yeah. I mean, granted, in the Italian version, you do see the woman's friend, quote unquote, in her apartment briefly, but that's it. That's all you see.
I was about to say, it's like one scene, I think, with her friend in her apartment, and
that's it. Yeah. When she's talking to her on the telephone, that is it. So it's very contained. Actually, think about it. All three of these stories are very contained.
Mm-hmm.
So this would fall into the genre of contained horror, I think, which is very popular these days. And so like those original gialli books, paperbacks, many of them were repurposed stories from other countries. It's the same dang thing. These are not Italian stories. None of these are original. They are adaptations of Russian stories. And I'm not sure. I didn't have time to look him up, but I could swear that he said that the two that I don't remember who wrote Drop of Water, but well, I don't know if the Verdilac is like an old folk tale.
Yeah.
And I think is it Chekhov or Tolstoy who wrote that? I don't know. I don't know if it's the Chekhov, as in the guy who wrote The Seagull and many other famous like Russian tragedy plays, or if the Tolstoy that he mentions is Leo Tolstoy, the guy who wrote The Brothers Karamazov, but because those two last names are very common in Russian. So I don't know. But it would be cool if it is, because those guys are very, very famous and brilliant writers, apparently. Although me personally, I don't really like Russian like drama literature for some reason. It just doesn't appeal to me. Probably because it's usually very droll and very life is terrible. You're going to commit suicide. I'm going to hang myself. And everybody is named 3 different things, and they're all very long and very hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
So that is why I usually don't like Russian literature. And they're usually big, thick books. But these are, I guess, old or oldish. The telephone is probably easily the most modern of all of them, especially not least to which of the fact that like it's about a telephone, which at the time was still fairly new technology.
60s.
And yeah, well, no, I'm talking about like when the original story was probably written. When the original story was probably written like a decade or so before that. So it was probably kind of initially sort of like early 20th century version of basically a techno thriller, imagining how this little device that lets voices come in through wires can torment you without anybody being there. Kind of like a proto internet. So, and it's because of that, it's become kind of a trope. You could say that this whole segment is basically just an extended version of the first 10 minutes of Scream. Kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
Because you have a lady in a very sexy kind of outfit. You're not sure what she does. You find out later kind of what she does. I think she's a prostitute, actually. And she's getting threatening telephone calls from this guy who keeps threatening that he's going to kill her in very, very horrible ways.
Mm-hmm.
And she can't seem to get anybody to help her. But until eventually she reaches out to her best friend, quote unquote, who doesn't live very far away, to come in and just stay with her, hoping that that this killer, who apparently is a guy that she knew and was in jail. And depending on which version you're listening to, he's either dead or still in jail, and maybe has broken out. Yeah, has escaped. So the question, but there's a tension throughout the story where you're wondering, is she crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Or is he really a guy? Sorry, he's really a guy, or is he really a threat? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got some vibes of Roman Polanski's what was the one? It's not the Tenant, it's the other one. Shit.
Repulsion.
Repulsion. Yes, I got.
Which I still have not seen, but I know what you're talking about.
That's what I got vibes from when I rewatched the movie.
Yeah. So yeah, in a convoluted sort of way that of explaining that is pretty much what this is. So yeah, that's and I think it's probably. I would, when I saw the American version, I would have said this was the weakest of the three, but it's a nice way to start things off. Having said that, though, I'm starting to think that, like, honestly, I couldn't appreciate it a lot more, actually. Probably because the Italian version is so much better.
Yes, but also, you kind of keep in mind that when you think about later films like Repulsion and Scream, and the ideals in those films are directly related to this early version of a slasher in the Giallo films. A lot of the tropes of the Giallo are found in this film and didn't exist before this film was released. You have the mask killer with the not the mask killer, but you have the killer with the black gloves. Like POV shots with with the killer. You never see who the killer is, even though you have a sense of who it is. You don't actually see it. But then, of course, there's the big reveal at the end that he's not the only person manipulating people. In those type of things, I guarantee you, when this originally came out in the '60s, were new and revolutionary and scared the crap out of the audiences. But because those things have become cliche now, if you've never seen this movie and you're watching it for the first time now, they do seem kind of old and tired and cliche, because you have to realize this was before its time in the 60s. This movie has come a long way and influenced a lot of different filmmakers and storytellers since then.
Yeah, but I still think that, like, modern audiences will still get a kick out of these, because at least with the telephone, it's a kind of case study in building suspense. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bravo's not Hitchcock, but he gets darn close. It's all about psychological suspense, and Brava does that really well. And also, Brava is known mostly for how he uses color, which, by the way, thank God for color. I really freaking hate that in this modern film landscape, we have this freaking war against color. I don't know why everything has to be diffused, why everything has to be soft focus. I hate it. I freaking hate it. That was like one of the reasons why I hate Denis Villeneuve's Dune, because he just drained all the color and life out of everything. Whereas Brava is just all greens and magentas and blues and supernatural, sickly looking greens, and phenomenal. Even in the first version, which actually this one, and the telephone either version, is probably, as far as the colors, his use of color is probably the most muted. it's mostly white and black, and I think the telephone is red, isn't it? Is it red or is it black?
I believe it is red. Yeah, red phone. That was one of my notes.
Okay.
I made notes on the red phone too.
Okay, so that phone is red. So of course the red, of course, it shows it as a vessel of evil and violence, which it totally is. So yeah, that's probably, and there's also like some kind of weird colors coming from outside from the windows. There's also like the threat of a storm outside, which my gosh, I'm a sucker for that. It gets me every time. I love a good thunderstorm in a horror movie. Uh, and so yeah, that's one of the cool things. I mean, yeah, you're right. It is a very familiar scenario, but but I think that it still strikes me as very modern, especially if you're watching the Italian version, because the Italian version, the two women are not just friends; they are ex-lovers.
So.
And she calls. I can't even remember the main character's name. I think I wrote it somewhere. But anyway,
Rosie.
What?
Rosie.
So Rosie, who apparently is a prostitute, who turned in this criminal, Frank, I think is his name. I don't know, but yeah, we'll just go with that. Anyway, to the cops years ago, and she thinks he's stalking her. But then in the Italian version, you find out that it's actually her friend who is doing the threatening calls. You find out that she is doing this voice, which doesn't make sense because like they show her putting like a cloth over the receiver to disguise quote unquote her voice. It wouldn't quite work that way, but okay, we buy it anyway. But yeah. I thought, and you find out that she's doing that to kind of get back at her for jilting her. And then later on, when she actually gets there and stays with her and waits till Rosie goes to sleep, she's writing a letter of apology, saying it was me. You don't have anything to worry about. I'm sorry. I thought it was a way to, get back together with you. It's really crappy of me. I'm sorry. And then, spoilers, folks, the door opens and it's the killer. It's Frank. He really did break out of jail.
Yep.
And then we have our first genuine giallo murder with a stocking and a neck.
Yep.
And death. So yeah, so I think that if you include that scene and that subplot, it makes all of the friends' decisions makes more sense. It motivates everything a whole lot more interestingly, as opposed to in the American version where she's writing the note basically saying, I drugged you to make you sleep so that I could call the loony people because I think you're going crazy. It's basically what she's saying.
Yeah, that's just what...
Which is like, when's she going to read that letter? When she's in the loony bin already? Are they going to read it to her and she's in a straitjacket or something? It doesn't work. Although they do add, probably at the behest of Samuel J. Arkoff, who owned American International Pictures at the time, which distributed this movie in the United States. Faithful listeners to this show will recognize Samuel J. Arkoff as the guy who was executive producer for lots of Roger Corman's movies, including Mask of the Red Death and most of the Poe flicks he did. So this does have a Corman connection. And they add this thing where after another spoilers, Frank is dealt with by Rosie. So this is kind of progressive in the sense that Rosie is sort of she does take charge in the end. She does vanquish the guy. So it kind of makes her kind of a final girl in a way. But yet the telephone still has his voice. It's like his ghost will not leave her. It will haunt her through the telephone. Zoom in, scream. I guess. Okay. I personally like it when in the Italian version, none of that's in there. It's just a long, slow pan over the wreckage that poor decision making and paranoia have left.
Yeah.
So it's bleak. It's bleak. I mean, it's not super bleak though because Rosie survives, hideously traumatized. But yeah, it just flows better in my opinion. It makes a lot more sense. And honestly, I think Zarkov just wanted to make it a ghost thing just to fit in with the other two tales, which are supernatural. But honestly, I feel like when you're watching an anthology, you should have variety. And I like the idea that you have your first segment be just a psycho killer. Your next segment, depending on which order you're watching it, it's a ghost question mark. And the last one, of course, is the vampire. So yeah, why not have variety?
Well, speaking on that, which one would you like to go first? The Vin de Lac or the drop of water? So,
well, you know what, Kevin, since I am Italian, and I just recently, and what's more, and the Italian version is more fresh in my mind. I feel like we should just go for I Ver de Lac, because yeah,
all right.
I think that's what we should do.
So we're gonna go with the
So
Vin de Lac.
yeah. So since I described the first thing, I think you should describe this one.
Well, mine will be much more general.
Or not.
Well, mine will be much more general because it's been a while since I've seen the film itself.
Well, how about this? Just give us the broad strokes of what the heck the Vertilac is, and then I would fill in the details.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember Boris Karloff's family is under siege by a mythological creature, I guess. They're great because Boris Karloff he plays the father or the grandfather. Now I can't remember.
Oh, he's the grandfather.
Okay,
he's the grandfather.
I had to remember that.
The patriarch.
Okay, yeah. So he's the patriarch. He's the grandfather. He goes out to look for his son, I believe.
Oh no!
Is it nice?
Oh no! He goes out there to kill the Turkish Vertilac.
But that's the son.
Yeah.
Okay. So he goes out there to kill his son because of this mythological creature, the Vertilac, and leaves the rest of the family in the house. And of course, like the Vertilac, if you're not familiar with that whole trope, it's kind of like a vampire for this other culture. It's more or less a vampire. It's a dead person who's come back and more or less. I don't think they really bite people as much as they kind of give their this infection back to them, and then they all die, and then they come back again. So it's a vampire-esque type of creature. Now, Boris Karloff is probably the very best person to play the Vertilac, and he's the patriarch of the family. He goes out to try and kill the Vertilac, but he's kind of late. And so we get a lot of this family dynamic going on in their house from the different family members before Boris Karloff's character returns. And of course, when he returns, the family notices there's something different about him. He's not acting the same. There's something different about him. And unfortunately for the rest of their family, they become too late to realize their fault by allowing this creature to enter their house, invited themselves.
Yes. So, and if those of y'all out there, diehard horror fans and people who are cultured and intelligent individuals, and who maybe have a subscription to Mubi, this story will seem very familiar to y'all because it's been adapted many, many times, and it's been adapted most recently as The Vertilac.
Yeah, that's a
French film that. By what?
A year or two ago? Like it's really recent.
Yeah, like last year.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna say.
Have you seen it?
I have not yet. It's on my list, but I couldn't.
Yeah. It might be more noteworthy to call it the one where the vampire is a puppet. That's kind of what it's known as these days. But yeah, I hear it's very good. I haven't seen it, unfortunately, but I know it exists. But I've seen clips of it, and yeah, it looks like it is the same story, completely, except that I think they put it in France instead of Russia. But in many ways it is a very Russian story, and it is very, very bleak.
This
It's
one
probably
is very bleak with the family, the whole aspect, and their patriarch coming back and essentially killing them all. I mean, it's a bleak story. They all,
yeah, and that's part of what blew me away about this when I rewatched it, or especially this version, is like, mind you, this is 1963. The Hays Code was still a thing 6 years ago, 5 years ago. Really, it's technically still a thing, but like the part of the Hays Code used to be like evil cannot triumph over good. And you could make the argument that the girls in the other two. By the way, this movie as a whole is very female driven. Now that I think about it, but like you could make the argument that the two main characters, the ladies in the other two stories, quote unquote, got what they deserve, unquote. It's a misogynist kind of way of looking at it, but you could make that argument for this segment. No, nobody. This is just straight up Jobian tragedy. Nobody deserves. Nobody did anything wrong. I mean, what did Karloff's character do that was so wrong? He went out and killed a monster that was killing people in his countryside and threatening his family. He did the right thing. What was the only thing he did wrong? He stayed out too late. Because that was the whole thing when they tell the count. Yeah, if grandfather does not come back before midnight tonight, he has been gone for 3 days. On the third day, if he does not come back at midnight, he will not come back as himself. He will come back as a creature, an undead thing, the Verdelac.
Yep.
Of course, because they say Verdelac, they never say the word vampire.
Nope.
But,
actually,
yeah.
I'm kind of wonder if they even use that term in Italian cinema at all, a vampire. I have to look.
Oh, I'm sure that there is an Italian vampire movie out there somewhere that uses. Actually, now that I think about it, I could swear that Brava himself made a vampire movie where they use that term, and I believe it is considered the first sound Italian horror movie that he made. I think in like the late 50s, and it's called I Vampiri, which is Italian for I Vampire or The Vampire.
Because I mean, even the so-called vampires, the Planet of the Vampires, isn't really vampires.
Yeah, they're aliens who drink blood. Yeah, exactly. But like, I think in this version, he's still playing with the accepted European myth of what a vampire is. Because I don't think you ever see their fangs, but they do drink blood. Mm-hmm. You do see punctures on their necks. It is unclear if sunlight does anything to them, but they only ever really seem to come out at night. Although the way Brava shoots his outdoor scenes, it seems like night doesn't really exist unless it's shot in a studio, because like his day for night stuff looks terrible. It looks like day. So it can be a little confusing, thinking, wait a minute, I thought did we just jump ahead 4 hours? Is it like, I thought this was supposed to be midnight? What? What?
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know. Well, then again, we don't know where in Russia this is supposed to be. If this is like in Siberia, maybe it's in the summer or late summer where there's like almost no night. I don't know. But regardless, so we don't know if they never say if the sunlight destroys them. They don't use any crucifixes to try and ward off or test whether or not the Karloff is in fact a Verdelac. They don't try and make him eat garlic.
Nope.
No, there's like almost no. There's almost no rules that we can fall back on. The only thing that seems to kill the vampire is if you cut their head off, because that's how he kills the Turk. Is he cuts? Karloff comes home and he's like, "I found him, I got him, and I brought the head back with me." Boom, and there's the head of the severed head. Which that severed head they hang outside their cabin, and it's just kind of hang it. They don't even hang it by a rope. It's hung by the guy's hair, and it's just his severed Turkish head with a long handlebar mustache coming off of it. And they use that head in the promotional materials for this thing.
That's the promotional materials for the film.
A lot. So it is an iconic fake head.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like a it's like and like I said, it's very contained. It's like a Russian chamber play. We almost never leave this cabin, this house in the middle of the very snowy Russian woods, except for once towards the end where we get into a abandoned monastery question mark. There's just very little of it left that is anything remotely resembling a home or a church or anything. It's just like it looks like random bits of pieces of other Roger Corman Gothic things, basically, but it's lit brilliantly by Brava, who, by the way, was a cinematographer.
Yep.
So it makes perfect sense that his movies look amazing. So it's but yeah, we mentioned before about the fake horse thing. So this segment is also known for these brilliant shots of Karloff pre-vampire form, riding on a horse, trudging through, looking heroic, except that it's very obvious that the front of this horse, which you never really fully see, is a fake horse. And he's not moving. Just branches and light and stuff are being moved around him. So this is where that comes from. And it's great to see. It's a sight to see. Speaking though of man on riding on horseback, we have another character in this drama, an interloper who comes from outside the family, discovers a dead body with a dagger in its body and no head.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I read somewhere that Quentin Tarantino saw this movie and got the idea for Pulp Fiction from it. I don't know how he made that connection because Pulp Fiction has nothing to do with this movie. The only thing I think they have in common is that they are both anthologies and they both feature one body, no head. So, yeah, because Travolta, bang. But yeah, so this guy comes and he is a aristocrat looking fellow and he looked very familiar to me. And then I realized, oh, I know where I've seen this bozo before. This guy was the hero, quote unquote, in Fall of the House of Usher, Roger Corman's version. This guy, he plays Count Vladimir.
Vladimir, yep.
Yes, which is funny because this is probably the only vampire movie in the history of vampire movies that has a Count, Vlad, who is not a vampire. Funny.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, weird, isn't it? So, and it's funny, like, I know this guy, his name escapes me at the moment, but, like, I remember hating him in Fall of the House of Usher because I felt like his performance sucked. And apparently Vincent Price hated him too because Vincent Price did not like method actors, and he was like going full method, and he thought that was pretentious BS, and I kind of agree with him. But anyway, so he's not as bad in this movie, I think. But then again, in Italian, he's dubbed in Italian, so maybe that's part of it. Because this movie is, make no mistake, folks, this movie was shot in English, but dubbed in Italian because a lot of Italian movies are shot in English, or people from different countries will just speak their lines in their language, no matter what the other person is speaking to them. And they'll just dub everything in Italian later, or dub everything in French, or whatever the distribution is, because the Italians don't shoot sound while they are shooting. They make all the sound effects and everything and dubbing post-sync. And so they were doing that at this time as well.
Yep.
So, yep. So, but anyway, this guy becomes Vlad, discovers this dead body, and I don't think you see in the American version, but he pulls up the body and you see the bloody stump for a bit, and then he's like, whoa. Which they did cut from the American version because gore might affect the delicate American sensibilities.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. But he takes the dagger back. He finds the cabin, takes the dagger back, sees, ooh, there's a dagger imprint on the wall, just like this one. This must be where it's from. But then the younger sons come and see him and they're like, hey, what are you doing breaking into my house? And they put a gun on him. He's like, oh, I was just wandering around and I found this dead body here and I found this dagger. I wondered if they belonged to you. Which he's right about the dagger. It does belong to them, but the body does not.
No.
So, but anyway, apparently in this version, the only way you can kill a vampire or a Verdelek is to stab it in the heart, and cut its head off, and preferably take the head somewhere else. It's the only way that which is probably why in Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, that is how they kill Count Dracula. Dracula does not get killed by a stake through the heart in the original, or get sunlight, while he's making out with the Mina character, like in some other versions that are out in theaters right now. But no, it's just stab him in the heart with any old knife will do. That's it. That's all you got to do, and then cut the head off. That's it. That's all you got to do, and that probably comes from this story. So this bit of Russian folklore has been passed around for ages. No one really knows how old this story is, but the Count is confused, and he tries to explain the whole one body, no head. And they've told him that it was a Turkish criminal who may have been a Verdelak, and that if his father's knife was in the criminal's back, he's like, oh, I guess that makes everything okay. And at this point, we kind of get to what I call I think all three of these are in a way a curse narrative. And what I mean by that is it's a type of horror where somebody does something and that results in an evil being passed on to them. So like in Telephone, technically she kills her enemy, and either his ghost is now passed on to her telephone and will torment her forever, or not. But in this story, you have a guy goes out to kill a vampire. He now, in killing him and not coming back home in time, has become the thing that he sought to kill. And now the cycle of horror starts all over again.
Interesting.
And you'll get the same thing later on with Drop of Water in a much more tangible way. And this makes me think of, I just recently finally saw Smile and Smile 2, which, by the way, I think y'all out there probably already know, that's probably the best way to watch Smile and Smile 2, because Smile 2 picks up right where the last one left off. And if you haven't seen Smile 1 and watched Smile 2, you would probably be very confused. But it's awesome. What?
I wouldn't even know, because I just breaking off of this and talk about Smile. I don't remember anything from Smile. I just know that Smile 2 is a far superior film. I loved Smile 2, and the first one it did nothing for me. Nothing.
I know, it blew my mind when I saw it. I'm like, I was so hyped to see this one, and I was like, it's just meh. And I'm like, how did it make so much money that it justified a sequel? But I'm like, I'm glad it did, though. Because now it's just like the mad prequel to this awesome movie. But I feel like you can watch it and be like, what was that burning body? Why is he seeing that? Why is he killing these Russians?
Well, it's the same I feel with the Purge movies. The first Purge is not that good of a movie. The Purge movies get better with the sequels. They get much better.
That's what I heard. Yeah, for sure. But that is the same kind of thing, where it is a curse that is passed from person to person. And so it's the same thing with the Verdelak, except that with the Verdelak, it is a vampire who specifically targets people who the former human loved in life.
Yes.
That's the main thing that makes it. So it's a curse narrative. It's also a plague narrative, in the sense that you have a plague that is spread and has a patient zero, in this case, the Turkish guy, and it's going to spread like a virus to all the other people one at a time. And that's how this thing kind of goes. And of all the segments, I feel like this one is probably the most colorful. This one's gotten the most of Brava's.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant colors and shadows
are everywhere in this movie.
Oh yeah, Karloff's reveal, because you don't see his face when he first steps off the horse, and everyone's looking at him and wondering what he is. Is he human? Is he not? And he goes against the post and leans up against it, turns his face, and zoom, there he is. And he's just terrifying looking. But yet, he's just a dude. He's still just a dude with a huge mustache and he's more hair than face, really. But what amazing hair. And Admittedly, I feel like in the Italian version, his performance is diminished a little bit because he's dubbed in Italian by another actor. Um, and also, I gotta tell you, I'm always weirded out when I watch foreign films with American or British actors in them who are dubbed in another language. It weirds me the heck out. I'm like, I know that person's voice. That is not how they sound. And I know they do not speak that language. That is weird, and I can't abide it.
All right.
It weirds me out.
Well, yeah. Well, let's move on to the last.
Always weirds me out. Before we move on, though, we have to mention that, like I said, the gore in this one is pretty intense. It's probably the bleakest of the three, and my goodness, what adds to the bleakness, this like ever stacking feeling of doom, is the fact that like this movie doesn't it doesn't play around in terms of like there's nothing sacred. They kill the kid, they kill the baby, they kill the dog. Like Karloff's got his favorite dog barking at him outside because the dog knows he's a vampire, he's a Verdelak, and he forces one of his younger sons to go and kill that dog. And it does it off screen, but you hear it go when it gets killed. So this one doesn't mess around. So I think it's another reason why I think modern audiences would appreciate this movie, because it doesn't frack around, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we'll spoil the ending to this one because it's also freaking bleak. But let's just say that Count Vlad should have left a long time ago.
Yeah.
There is a love story in this one. It's a tragic love story, and the women in this, by the way, the women all look amazing. Even though this girl's supposed to be a Russian peasant, she has really, really big made up eyes. Like big giant eyelashes. I guess that's just the way Russian peasants looked in that particular part of the world.
Oh Jesus.
So yes, and their final segment is called A Drop
of Water.
So what the heck is this one? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I feel like this movie, again, it's also a cursed narrative.
Oh yes, most definitely. Of all of them.
Oh yeah, but it's also like each one of these three, I feel like have some kind of moral lesson to them, even if they're kind of messed up morals. Like I feel like the first moral lesson of the telephone is, I guess, don't mess with your friends, even if you're mad at them. At least for the Italian version. The second one, I feel like the lesson is don't let your parents in if they've been out too late because they might have changed and become monsters. The third, and this one though, this one has a powerful moral lesson, which is don't steal crap from dead people. Just don't. Just don't even think about doing that at all, ever, because they'll haunt you. Because that's what happens in this. This is a so like the Karloff thing is a period drama, a gothic period drama. But this one I think is supposed to be modern.
That's why I like it.
Yeah, but I feel like the way her apartment is shot and the set decoration and everything, it feels like it's from an earlier time than the telephone. Like, is there even a phone in her apartment? I don't ever remember hearing it ring.
I don't think so. I didn't make any notes about.
I don't think so. It feels older. It feels from a slightly older time. Although there is some like flashing, I think, yellow or bright light outside of her room that's from, I think, a neon sign or a flashing sign. So there is electricity. There is running water, obviously, plays very prominently. But there's no mention of cars. So it has this old world feel to it. And I feel like it also has more of the shadows and the lights and the greens and the blues that come in and make it feel more dreamlike.
Especially across the corpse's face. You see a lot of...
Okay, so before we get too far into it, yeah, this is a story about a nurse who was called in the middle of the frickin' night to take care of the corpse of a medium who has died.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, that corpse is one of the most scariest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Although, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this by the way is probably the one segment that was messed with the least by Zarkov. It's pretty much intact in the Italian version.
I believe so
And
too.
yeah, but I think maybe my memory is messing with me, but I feel like the zoom in on the corpse, that initial reveal, was a little faster in the American version. Because when I watched the Italian version, it was a bit slower reveal. It's still terrifying, but I feel like it's a bit slower. They may have messed with that. I'm not sure. But folks, if you haven't seen this movie, do not go and Google image search the face of this corpse, because it will. I think it detracts. It will detract from your enjoyment of this movie. Just watch it in the context of the movie, because I don't think you want that spoiled. It's so. I think, like, we know we're on the internet savvy age. We've seen dead bodies a lot. We know what they look like at various stages of composition, but I feel like even if it's a fairly obviously fake makeup looking dead body, it's still, when done right, can still be terrifying, because sometimes corpses do look like that. They can have a waxy looking appearance. They can look like a maquette, and this one can look that way, but its freaking eyes and rickus looking grin, just like, I can't describe it. It's like some kind of hell hag that's just permanently frozen face of just like, it almost looks like the illustration of the Babadook, I think, the way its mouth is.
Yes, yes, it does actually. And that's what makes it so interesting. And one of those images that stays with you long after watching the film is the image of this dead medium on the ground, because that's, and thankfully that's her job, because they probably wouldn't be able to get away with it if it was not.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, so like, she goes to, so the nurse has to go in and take care of this corpse, and the question is, how did she die? Well, the very nervous housekeeper says that she just died of fright, basically, in her sleep.
Yeah.
And that apparently she was a medium, and you see, and the cool thing Brava does is he tells a story with just set dressing and props. You see the cats. There's so many cats just wandering in and out of here, and the implication is that these cats have inherited her house,
Mm-hmm.
because she was the cat lady. And then, excuse me, and then you see like the tarot cards on the table, and I think maybe she says that, like, she basically died shortly after having a seance. So it's like there's an implication that this medium, this lady, I don't think we ever even know her name,
I
if
did
I'm not
not.
mistaken.
I was about to ask you the same thing. I did not write a name down for her, so I don't know if she had one or not.
I don't think she had one either. It's
Okay,
just
I
the
felt
medium.
bad.
But like, she is, the implication is that, like, she is a character who got so deep into the occult and necromancy that she unleashed something from the beyond she never should have, and it killed her. And that's the implication. I feel like that makes this segment have a whole lot in common with something like Smile, where you are seeing the beginning, where you start your story with the ending of a previous story, and that it's an evil that's going to be passed on. In this case, it is passed on because this nurse, who I guess is overworked and underpaid, decides to try and steal this priceless looking ring off the very fat and mummy like hands of this corpse. there's also a fly that comes in on the finger when the ring is taken away. There's an implication that the fly itself is like a manifestation of evil. And then of course there is the titular drop of water that she heard when she was in there while she's preparing the corpse, which I don't think, by the way, the drop of water and the fly kind of freak her out a little bit, and she just kind of leaves. I don't think she ever actually finishes her job.
I don't think she does either. I noticed that too when I rewatched. I was like, I don't think she actually finished her job, but she takes that freaking ring and the rest of her short life.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I guess like of all the characters in this story, she's probably the one who deserves her fate the most. Because not only is she a thief, she sucks at her job. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's the other moral lesson for this is like, if you're gonna do a job, do it well and do it with integrity, or you're gonna get haunted by ghosts.
Oh my god. What did you think of this one? I really like this one only because I love the cinematography in this one. Like I like the telephone, but for this one, I think that some of the imagery is so striking, and I love the usage of lighting in this film.
Yeah,
and,
lots of greens, pinks, and blues.
yes, and the thing is that this film, I think because we're not supposed to like the nurse, it's okay to like, oh, this all happens because she steals from a fucking corpse. Whereas with, like you said, the second one, the Vertilac, is very bleak because the family didn't really deserve all the tragedy that came to them. So, I was kind of fine with how this one played out.
Yeah, and yet it's still terrifying because
Oh yeah,
the way that corpse haunts her, and the shot where it's there in the chair and then not there, and then it just kind of floats. I know it's an old effect with like putting something on a skateboard or something, but it's still so unnerving. And the fact that it's moving its hands, I couldn't tell if it's an actress with a mask on or if it's just a puppet. Either way, it's amazing.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, of all three stories, I think this is the most effective in terms of scaring the audience.
Oh yeah, it is the most effective. It is definitely the most nightmare-inducing.
Yeah,
and it's also like the one that has, I think, the least dialogue.
yes.
Most of the time it's just pure cinema. There's very little dialogue until the end, and yeah, that's it. You just you're just there with this person. You don't like her, but dadgummit, she's your audience surrogate, and you're stuck with her. And whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, but
the drop of water itself, I feel like, is kind of a harkening back to Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart.
Oh, that's
because she keeps hearing, because she keeps hearing that drop, 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 and keeps turning off all her faucets. And she's trying, and sees like a spilled bottle. Okay, stop that. But she keeps hearing it because it's her guilt. Just like the guy in the story, Telltale Heart, he keeps hearing the heartbeat of the old man. In fact, I'm pretty sure there is a version of Telltale Heart as a short that I saw in black and white where you never hear the sound of the heartbeat. You just see dripping faucets and like other things that could be causing the sound, which I just thought was clever. So I wonder if that filmmaker got it from this movie. Another person influenced by Brava. But like, yeah. So I feel like, yeah, I agree with you. I think this is the strongest of all the three. Karloff is great and everything, but I feel like it's the longest of the three, the Vertilac, and I feel like it may be maybe a little long. So I don't know. But it's also gothic horror, and I feel like you got to be in the right mood for gothic horror. Whereas, and gothic horror, depending on who's making it, can age well or not well. But I feel like Drop of Water is timeless.
So I'm going to agree with you that with this version of the film, putting the Vertilac second and this one last works much better because it is the more terrifying one. And in my opinion, that's how you want to leave an audience when when they leave the theater or when they finish watching your film. Whereas flipping them, the Vertilac, like you said, is longer. And it's a gothic horror. And by the time you get to that third story, if you're not really into the gothic horror, you may just tune that one out. Whereas with this one, A Drop of Water, you're not tuning that one out. That's a very effective vignette there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I feel like, and with all anthologies, each story can stand on its own. You know, if you feel like if you're pressed for time, ladies and gentlemen, you got a lot of things you got to do today, and you can only have time for one segment of this daggone movie. I say watch Drop of Water. Although if you're a diehard Karloff fan, you gotta watch yourself some Karloff, and you haven't seen this movie, then just watch the Vertilac segment. It's fine. It'll scratch that itch real good. Watch the American version though, because again, it's weird seeing him speak Italian, and he's not Italian.
It is weird. It is. Weird. I had forgotten that. I had forgotten that until I rewatched it. I was like, oh yeah, because I've seen both versions multiple times, and so because the thing is when I go back to rewatch this, and I've seen this maybe 7 or 8 times now, I don't know which version I'm going to pick until I decided at that moment because my DVD box set has both versions, so I can just pick which one I want to watch.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think audiences will figure out which one they're watching the moment they start hearing Bernissimo, you'll start hearing the Italian dub. You'll know because unless you speak fluent Italian, which I do not, I can only speak the curse words in Italian, so which I will not to hear.
Oh my god!
But like I do think that the Italian version has a better kind of finale with the fake horse. Because you do see, like I said, you got more Karloff for your buck in the American version, but in the Italian version, you see kind of Karloff playing to the audience as if they are a character. This is one of the few anthology movies I think where, in a lot of anthologies like the original Tales from the Crypt, this is the movie, or say Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, or Dead of Night, or other Tales from the Hood even. There is a wraparound segment where you might have a main kind of character who's telling the stories, but it's a story within a story. It's the thing that you keep going back to with each segment and ties everything up at the end. This is one of the few anthology movies that I've ever seen where it is a host who's talking to you, the viewer, and he's having a playful time of it, and he's talking to you and says basically at the end, where in the Italian version at least, where he's in full Vertilac outfit, but he's talking to the camera, and he's on the fake looking horse, which is like a sawhorse with a fake head on a gimbal, and he basically is like, well, that was neat, and he says, and the dialogue is kind of beautiful here, translating it to English. He's on horseback, and he's addressing the camera, and he's, like I said, he's in full vampire outfit, and he says, now you be careful on your way home tonight. Dream about me, and we shall be friends. And I thought, aw, that's delightful. I feel like that says something beautiful about the relationship between horror fans and their stars.
Oh my god! So yes, and Boris Karloff was a star, so having him do that actually was probably a coup for the whole production to begin with.
Oh yeah, and you could tell he had so much fun with it, and the camera pulls back as he keeps doing the horse thing, and you see the other camera filming him, and you see the crew people running around the fake horse with branches, and you see a whirling motorcycle in the background? Nope. No, you see a whirling light fixture showing like the lights from the moon. You're supposed to be creating the illusion that he's riding.
Yes.
And I feel like doing that kind of diffuses the terror in a way that I think a lot of horror doesn't do today, but used to do a lot more back then. It's basically as if Brava is saying, like, look here, it's okay. We told you some bleak-ass stories tonight, but it's all fake. It's all pretend. Look, it's fine, kids. You can go home and sleep good tonight, knowing that it was all pretend and we had fun tonight. And I think there's something innocent and childlike about that I really appreciate.
Well, yeah, because the tone in the music also changes when that all happens too.
Oh yeah. The score in the
Sure.
Italian version is much more playful.
Yes.
It's much more playful, more artistic. Actually, you can make the argument that maybe this movie becomes kind of a satire of, at least in the host segments, it becomes kind of a satire of the horror genre in and of itself. It becomes almost a meta play when you have Karloff addressing the camera and playing with cinema tricks and conventions and everything. So yeah, I think it kind of elevates the film as a whole.
Oh yeah, most definitely. When I first saw that sequence where they revealed the behind the scenes stuff at the very end, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh shit, this is way ahead of its time. You would have never seen this in any movie back in the '60s or '70s. Much like this wasn't common at all. This isn't something that audiences were ever accustomed to that early in cinema. That was something that came much, much, much later.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. So I don't really have a Schwarzenegger alternator for any of these segments, although I think it would have been hilarious if I had thought about if you could just imagine if, say, it was Schwarzenegger's voice on the phone saying, "I'm going to take your body and cut it to pieces and love it in so many ways, or I will kill you." It would be disturbing and hilarious at the same time.
Very disturbing.
Or you could imagine Karloff as Schwarzenegger showing us a scene that you never see in this movie. You never see him kill the Turk. It was all done off screen. You never see him cut off that head. So you can imagine Schwarzenegger saying, "A little off the top."
Good God.
Or like or maybe like he's one of the cats in the drop of water. I don't know how that would work, but anyway. But I feel like this movie, you can take I've created this new thing that you can apply to other movies like this, because I feel like bleakness in horror in recent years has kind of become more the norm, whereas this movie was the exception. So back in the day, all three of these stories have terrible endings. Yeah. They're all dark. There's not a bright light in any of it. And that was rare back in those days. So I think we should have this thing that I'd like to call the bleakness scale. Yeah. And here at the bleakness scale in the Conversation Horror podcast, we like to rate movies on a 1 to 5 scale of bleakness. 1 being no bleakness at all, it's all sunshine and rainbows, and 5 being Hereditary or a Serbian film.
Oh my God.
That's your standard. That's as bleak as bleak.
Jesus.
So, segment 1, how would we rate this on the bleakness scale, 1 to 5? Kevin, what do you think?
Why do you want to do this separately? The whole movie is bleak. I would give the whole movie a 4.5.
4.5? See, here's the thing, though. I feel like we need to do this together. I feel like the stories individually should have a scale, because if you think about it, if you're doing the movie as a whole, the bleakness of it is totally offset by Karloff's host segments.
The big reveal at the end is also, that's why it's not bleakness 5. It's a bleakness 4.5 because of the ending and the change in music and the fact that you're laughing at Boris Karloff on the fake freaking horse.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would even give it, if we're doing it as a whole, I would give it a 3.5 out of 5 if that is the case, which kind of puts it which I think would kind of put it more in the area of like less bleak than, say, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, a little bit less than that. Because at least in Night of the Living Dead, the zombies are dealt with. Sure, the redneck racists are doing the job, but we've had things pretty much under control.
I can see that. Movies like a Serbian film, Night of the Living Dead. What was that? The one I was just Old Boy are freaking bleak by the time you get to the very end of those movies.
The original Old Boy, though, has a happy ending at least. I feel like to be a truly bleak movie, you cannot have a happy ending in any form, unless it's like ironically happy in its bleakness, kind of like Hereditary.
How about Martyrs?
Or oh gosh, yeah, that would be a 6 on the 1 to 5 scale.
All right. Oh my God.
But, but yeah, I would say that the Vertilac is probably. Well, I've got okay. I'll do it briefly. I'll do it really quickly. I think like the first one, I think Telephone is probably a 2.5. Vertilac is probably a 4.5. Yeah, that's a 4. A soft 4, a soft 4. And the third one, yeah, probably about a 3.5.
Really?
A 3.5 for only because, like we said, that daggum nurse deserved what she got. So at least there's a universe in which justice exists. So I feel like to be a truly bleak film, you need to have a you need to have a tone of doom, and you also have to have like horrible misfortune befalling all of your characters, and there has to be like a sense of like no justice in this universe. But in the very least, you got justice for that horrible act of grave robbing.
So yeah, so we'll have to use this scale when we do all those other movies we mentioned so far, and we'll add in the Descent with the original cut,
Oh.
and a couple of other movies like that. We should definitely bring this back on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And feel free to use this when I'm not on it. Just
Yeah.
pass it on to our fellow hosts. I'm sure they'll have great fun with it, debating as to where on the scale it really falls. So I think that's the fun part, is deciding, you know what? No, this shouldn't be that bleak, because it's really not that bleak. Because if you think about it, everything's the world is still okay at the end of this thing, even if everybody else is dead. You could break it down like that.
Oh my God. All right. Any last words about the film before we sign off for this episode?
I think this is definitely a movie to watch if you are a true horror aficionado and you're interested in seeing where all your favorite masters learn their tricks.
You know what? I'm gonna second that. That is a really valid point for this film. I think horror fans and horror filmmakers can really appreciate this film, not only from the technical aspects but also from the storytelling aspects. I don't know how effective it would be for a general audience, to be honest. To be honest with you, they might find it entertaining. I don't know, because anthology movies they're like so infamous in our culture now. I mean,
yeah. I mean, also, it's like, I think it depends on how you pitch an anthology to people. Because, like we said, if you think about it, Pulp Fiction is an anthology movie.
yeah, but it's not pitched as one.
But if you pitched it as such, you could be like, oh, well, then I guess that's okay then. Because, like, they'll be like, okay. Or if you could just pitch it like, it's like Tales from the Crypt, where it's different stories. So, like, oh, okay. Because people have analogy. There is an analogy in this culture to things like that. We do have things that still occur in our or Creep Show, the new Creep Show. So it definitely fits into that category. And I think if a modern audience is familiar with that stuff, they're familiar with this. And also, ladies and gentlemen, let's not. I don't know why I said ladies and gentlemen. I'm really addressing the host here. I have found that today's young people should not be underestimated. Every time I think, oh, these kids today, they wouldn't appreciate the old Universal monsters or the classic horror and all that. Whenever I say that and I get down on it and I think, those things are gone, I stumble across a Facebook group called, Classic Monsters, where most of them are people under 20 in that group. And I see them posting their DVDs that they brought of Bride of Frankenstein, or their posters that they have, and the masks they bought, and the model kits that they paint. They have model kits that I didn't have when I was a kid. So these kids these kids out here are discovering the stuff because they're dissatisfied with the crap that's out there now, and they're going back. So yeah, you never know with the kids these days, man.
Well, I would love for I hate to say this, the Italian cinema and culture themselves to bring back horror, but unfortunately for us, horror fans, the Italian film industry in regards to horror is pretty much dead unless it's on TV.
Yeah.
That's a sad thing to say, especially considering how much they influenced the world cinema in the 60s, 70s, and the early 80s. I mean, they were like Italian horror movies were everywhere. So it's sad to see where it's gone to now. But this is an amazing anthology film, just like I would talk about Dead of Night as being an amazing anthology film that I think everyone should watch. Whether you like anthology movies or not, they're both great movies in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my favorite Italian horror. I think I think the work of Argento and Fulci probably, for me at least, is stronger. But that's just my opinion, and I'm entitled to be wrong.
Well, me and you talk a lot about Fulci. We haven't done a lot about Argento yet, but me and you've done some Fulci, and we're gonna get back to it.
Yeah, for sure. So, what do we rate this movie, Kevin?
I'm gonna still give it a 4. This is still a favorite of mine. I've seen it 7, 8 times, probably 9 now that I just rewatched again. And this is a film I watch both versions, which I don't always do. I can't remember the original version of Lisa and the Devil, but I don't watch Lisa and the Devil anymore. I watch the other version. I can't remember what it's called to save my life. They're on the same disc on my box set. So.
I think it's actually called Exorcismo or something. Yeah. Something with an exorcist in it. Yeah.
I could have them backwards. I watched the Italian version more so than the other version. The other version's like it's like they just re-edit the whole thing and it doesn't make any fucking sense. But this one is one of those rare movies where I've seen both versions and I flip-flop them all the time. It doesn't really matter to me because I enjoy all 3 stories for different reasons. Like we've been talking, they're each different stories, but I enjoyed each of them differently for different reasons. So I still give it a 4. I'm gonna watch it again in probably a year or 2 just for the hell of it because I'm a Mario Bava fan. But be a fan or not be a fan and enjoy this movie. So
yeah, and I think I don't think they've changed the title for this one that much when it was released overseas. And in case y'all out there are wondering, yes, this is where a young English band called Earth had been out at the movies one Saturday afternoon in England and saw it at some point and think, oh, that's a pretty good title, Black Sabbath. I think maybe we should change our band name to it. And it's like, and they said, all right, that's a good idea. That man, of course, was Ozzy Osbourne, and that band was Black Sabbath.
So with that little tidbit, I want to thank you, Thomas.
Wait a minute, folks. You didn't get my rating or my object that I picked to rate this movie.
I usually go after you, so that's why I forgot. You do your rating first.
That's okay, Kevin. I appreciate. I accept your apology. So I think there's only one object I could pick from this movie to rate it. It's the severed Turkish head. It's the iconic giant handlebar mustached plastic head that's hanging off a post. It's in the posters. I feel like it defines this movie. Although I could swear there's a version of the poster where there's a headless Boris Karloff riding on horseback with his own head.
There is.
And that's confusing as heck because that never happens. Spoilers, folks.
No.
So, yeah, I would rate this 3 out of 5 severed Turkish Verdelak heads.
Well, mine will be 4 stolen rings off of a medium who's dead.
There you go. That's good. I like that.
That's why you go first, because so I don't forget that we do this.
Good to know. Good to know.
All right, so with that, I want to thank you, Thomas, for joining us for Conversations on Horror on Mario Bava's Black Sabbath. From everywhere, from everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, everyone out there, we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check out some of our previous episodes on a lot of different films from a lot of different eras and a lot of different subgenres. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, do that thing you do with podcasts to be up to date for some of the stuff we have coming up for you soon here at Conversations in Horror. Thank you so much and have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken House Pictures.